What's going on YouTube? Warstorm here, coming at you guys in their video today. Today I'm going to be showing you guys going back and updating some older lists, and today it's going to be Herald. So Herald has been a deck that I personally picked up a while ago. I still own most of the cards. It's been a while since I picked up the deck though. Herald is a deck I kind of fell in love with last year when Ben 10 and all the new support for Cyber Angels was released. It was a really super fun combo heavy deck. Had a pretty good time playing it at regional, and I do think that the deck still has its strong points. Herald of Perfection is still an annoying card for any deck to deal with, and Cyber Angel Ben 10 is an absurdly powerful card that will always be good in some form or fashion. And mechanically speaking, the deck is it's still got its super strong points. Now, the problem I've noticed a lot in testing on stream and whatnot with the deck is that it's still good. It just shows its age in terms of the popular hand traps really crapping on the deck. Cards like Droll and Lockbird on Herald is basically a death sentence. So much like a lot of old other decks I've shown you guys, like DDDs, you must play Call by the Grave in this deck, in the main deck, in some form or fashion, because that's what's going on. Like, Droll pretty much hits a lot of the top tier decks, so people are going to be main decking it. You kind of have to build your deck around what everyone else is building. I understand this is so. Anyways, here's my updated list. So the first thing you guys are going to notice straight away is the Sky Striker cards are in here. I understand a lot of you guys are probably sick and tired of seeing Sky Strikers in everything, but hear me out for a moment. Sky Strikers do add a lot to Herald. First off, they synergize incredibly well with Ritual Sanctuary. You're getting spells in the grave to make Ritual Sanctuary's effect easier to resummon monsters. And that in and of itself, being able to search and generate tons of advantage is what this deck does best. Being able to get those, recycle those cards, get those cards back in your hand is absolutely brutal. The Sky Striker engine definitely has a place in Herald because it puts easy spells in the deck that you can then put back in the deck and do the whole thing all over again. It's definitely a super powerful addition to the deck, but the other thing you guys might notice is how compact the ratios are compared to some of the previous builds I did show you guys. Herald is a victim of what I call diminishing returns, where the core of the deck with the three Heralds, the Ben 10s, the Star Seraphs, and Christia, that core is super, super strong. But the more you add to Herald, the more cards outside of these particular cards you add to the deck, the less consistent your deck is. So that, because of those diminishing returns, that's the main reason why it's built this way. Yes, it's super, super compact, but that's how you have to build the deck, because if you play the more monsters, the more like non of this core you play, the less consistent your deck gets. It seems like a super small core, but I think at the heart of it, you're going to be able to build something that your opponent's probably more than likely not going to be able to break. Well, the way we'll go ahead and get to deck list. Pretty standard list in terms of the three Herald of Perfection. Again, is your boss monster. You always max out on these. Ben 10 is also one of the, like I said earlier, being able to search your entire deck with any of your light fairies straight from your deck is absolutely amazing. The main thing this does for you is allows you to get your missing stick and chair piece. So that's the really thing I really do like about it. It really does make the deck a lot faster, and that's one of the reasons I do like having the, speaking of stick and chair, these cards are the reason the deck functions. Star Seraphs are the best play the deck has. Upon normal summon of Scepter with chair in hand, you will draw 3 cards and pop a card in the board. That is incredibly strong. And on top of that, Scepter is not a hard once per turn, so you can continue to use it to continue to get searches to get more negations for your Herald. Then it's one of the most powerful engines ever created. It's just the issue it's always had is that you can't search both pieces. Well, that's kind of where the Ben 10 here comes in. As far as, and then, of course, we have the one Arc Lord Christia. If you do feel like if you don't have the money for engages, which I know a lot of you guys do not, and you can probably cut these entirely and actually play more fairy monsters. The main reason it's lined up this way is because it keeps it a little bit more consistent and flowing. If you want to play more fairies, though, there's a lot of other good options. You could definitely play Ida 10. And maybe at 2 with some Machine Angel rituals to give you more fairies to cycle through your deck. You could also play Honest as well. It's a pretty decent little card, although it's definitely not as good as it used to be. You could also play Saphira and its spell as well. But again, Saphira is a decent card, just a bit slow for our current thing. Manju is also an option, but I do not play Manju because Ben 10 searches everything you would be searching with Manju anyways. So That's the main reason it is this way. But Christia, back to Christia, it is still a, if you summon a Herald Perfection and a Christia, it is going to be GG for your opponent. Christia is still an incredibly ridiculous card. If you have a Christia with protection, there's nothing your opponent can do. They can't kaiju it. There's just literally nothing you can do. Putting 4 fairies in the grave is really easy with this deck, and it's also incredibly easy to manipulate the number of fairies by summoning them back with this field spell here. It's a ridiculously powerful card, but I do think it's one of the best cards in the deck. Then we have the 3 Dawn of the Herald. This is the ritual spell for Herald. It is the great thing about it is when you ritual summon, you can banish it from the grave to add back the same monster you did tribute for cost. Now, granted, Dawn does require you to tribute exact numbers, which is the reason it hasn't seen a lot of play until we got Ben 10. But being able to get a Ben 10 search and then banish the Herald as Chain Link 2 to block your opponent from possibly negating their Ben 10 search is an incredibly powerful play, because you're getting the search with Ben 10, you're summoning your Herald, and you're getting the Ben 10 back to be able to use for free negation fodder. It's one of the best things the deck has. You just kind of have to be careful. You want to always try your best to keep one engraved to be cycled back with your preparation of rights. That's the main thing you want to think about. Speaking of prep, this card coming to 3 definitely helps this deck a ton. Getting more access to Herald is always good, and it's still an amazingly powerful card. There's a reason it was limited at 1 to 1 at one point. Then 3 pre-prep. Pre-prep it's a +1. It's really ridiculous that, I understand it's kind of limited in what it can search, but it's still a ridiculously powerful +1, and you can't really sneeze that too much. Ritual Sanctuary and Terraforming. Sanctuary is a card that just does so much because it allows you to get dead spells out of your hand to fix your hand, and on top of that, you can shuffle those same spells back to special summon a fairy from your grave, provided you have enough spells equal to its level. This card fixes so many the way I've always explained about this card is a little bit like, if you remember Pantheism of the Monarchs, it's not as good as Pantheism, but what Pantheism and Ritual Sanctuary do is they fix bad hands and break great hands. And that's one of the things that makes Ritual Sanctuary so damn good. And because you need to see it that much more, you play the 3 Terraformings. The main reason you play Terraforming at 3 is because you can discard extra copies of Ritual Sanctuary, and the way Herald plays, you want to see this card turn 1. It's much like ABC, and Union Hanger. It's one of the most important cards in the deck. You definitely want to see it as often as possible. Then we have the 1 Upstart Goblin. Upstart is pretty much something you always play in Herald because you don't really care about giving your opponent life points. You're going to be locking them down with Herald anyways. That's why I like it. And as I mentioned earlier, we have the 3 Called by the Grave. This card is pretty much, you got to play it because if the format slows down and we see less hand traps, you can definitely take this card out. But as of now, it's a card you really need to have in your deck for that reason. Then we have the new card, which is Foolish Mass Burial. So it's a new card. If you're unfamiliar with what it does, it says pay half your life to send an monster from your extra deck to the grave. It is a hard once per turn. You cannot set spells and traps, but you do not care about that because you're going to be summoning Herald. This is arguably a better version of Gale Dagra. Yes, you can use Gale Dagra twice, so it makes it somewhat better in some situations, but this card is live all the time. Dagra, there will be times where you won't be able to use Dagra, and on top of that, its restrictions don't really affect you at all. It's a pretty good staple in this deck. Definitely something you can max out on when we do get it, but I do think it's a really powerful card. Then we have the Sky Striker engine, as I mentioned earlier. I understand a lot of you guys aren't a fan of seeing this in everything, but it does have good synergy with what Herald does for your deck. If you do not have these, as I mentioned earlier, you can play more fairy monsters, so you have more things for your Herald to pitch as discard cost, things like Manju, things like Honest, but I am a huge advocate of this in Herald because it puts those spells in the grave, because it's just having a decent link monster, having something else to and having an easy way to remove threats before you summon your Herald is pretty damn big. Then for the extra deck, now I'm going to admit most of this extra deck you aren't really going to touch in most cases because you don't really use it that much. But of course we have the Herald of Arclights for our Foolish Mass Burial. Again, not too much to say. We have the 2 Kagaris. I don't play Shizuku because honestly, searching an end phase, doesn't really do a whole lot for you. I mean, you can play it because it gives you a spell that you can instantly then ditch again for the next turn for Ritual Sanctuary and do the whole thing over again. It's really up to you though, but personally, I just think you really just need the Kagari. That's all you need. And then we have the new guy, which is our Hip Hashinigan. Hip Hashinigan is a pretty decent, easy discard to summon. There'll be some times where you'll have a bunch of Star Seraphs on the board, and really you make a hyperstar, because it does also pump up your Herald by up to, I believe it is Herald's 28, so it'll be at 3,300 defense, which is nothing to sneeze at. It can make some of your monsters a little bigger so you can punch over things. There's not too much to say. Then we have a Nightmare package. I think these cards are really good because they give you ways to get rid of threats if you open your Skyscraper engine. It just gives you something to, and it gives you, and really you don't really care that they don't point to a main monster zone. These two, as far, because they just get rid of things that are going to in the way of you making plays. And that's the main thing, is you're able to, and you're also pitching spells to the grave to then be, shuffled back. Ritual Sanctuary. Unicorn is a card I do like also because it just gives you, shuffling things back to the deck is pretty dang good, and it's relatively easy to make. Then we have Skull Dread and Borreload. I do not know if you're going to really touch these cards, but drawing through, most of the time they're just kind of here. Herald is always kind of an issue getting rid of kind of like untargetable things. It's kind of where Borreload can come in. I'm not saying you're going to summon it very often, but if you pull off the entire stick chair combo and have one other monster, you can summon it. It's not impossible to summon. These are kind of throwaways. Fairy Cheer Girl is a card I've played in previous builds, but I don't know really how viable it is without Norden. But you can make it with 2 sticks and then draw an extra card, which is always good. But again, this extra deck is kind of like, you're not going to make most of these cards anyways. We have the Ouroboros and the Deltaros. These are the best options for your stick and chair, because stick chair does require you to have a monster that requires 3 or more level 4s. Deltaros is better going second, because when you summon it, your stick effect will activate special to pop a card and draw, and then you can use Deltaros to pop another card. And then Ouroboros is just amazing going first, because you can take a card out of your opponent's hand, and that is always really big for anything. It combos really well if you do play Saphira, because you can make Ouroboros and loop a card in your opponent's hand, then use Saphira to loop another card. So looping 2 cards is definitely not bad. I mean, it's no Gumbalar, but it's still pretty decent. They have a couple rank 6s. I mean, you're probably not going to make these very often, but they're here. Dragulus can be pretty decent in some scenarios, but mostly it's better. Again, most of the time you're just better off probably making something else. And then we have a Utopia Beyond. I actually really do like having this card in here because it does help you to push OTKs, which sometimes Herald does struggle with. If you have 2 Heralds just chilling on the board, make Utopia Beyond, put some other things on the board, and you can OTK your opponent. It does help with that to an extent. It really depends on how you feel about it. So anyway, guys, about comes to the end of my updated Herald of Perfection deck profile for you guys. It's always going to be a favorite of mine. I hope, and if you guys have any suggestions or changes you would make to the deck, please let me know down in the comment section below. And as always, I thank you guys for watching. Scorestorm signing out.